Good morning, and thanks to everyone for joining us today for another cooking demo, part of the Celebrating What Unites Us series. Celebrating What Unites Us is a collaboration among Age-Friendly Boston, Armenian Heritage Park on the Greenway, and Oldways. Oldways is a food and nutrition nonprofit helping people live healthier, happier lives, and it is a pleasure for us to be involved in this wonderful collaboration with two great partners. And today we're joined by Chef Tyler Stout from Troquet on South in Boston, who's going to show us how to make a classic French recipe. Before we get started, I'd like to remind you that the chef will be here for a live Q&A to answer your questions about the recipes. So please type them in the chat as you watch his cooking demo. You'll be emailed the recipe shortly after today's webinar. And then finally, if you'd like to watch this again or share it, a recording will be available on oldwayspt.org and also by searching for Oldways on YouTube. Thanks to all of you for joining us. Thank you, Chef Tyler. Thank you, Andrea and Barbara and everyone. We're so happy to have you here. And now I'm going to turn things over to Andrea Burns.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Andrea. I'm the Director of Age Friendly Boston for the City of Boston's Age Strong Commission. The goal of Age Friendly Boston is to increase opportunities for a healthy, meaningful life. This program, in addition to the opportunities that Hannah mentioned, is also going to be re-aired on Boston City TV for those who don't have access to computers, and that's Monday through Friday from 9 to 10 a.m. and on Boston Neighborhood Network throughout the week, which is BNN, and that can be found on Xfinity Channel 23, RCN Channel 83, and FiOS Channel 2160. Today we have a wonderful demonstration by Chef Tyler Stout from Troquet in the Leather District. And now I'd like to introduce Chef Tyler. Please take it away.
Hey, how are you? Thank you for having me, you all. Great to be with you. I'm excited to do this and be able to share French onion soup with you all.
Thank you so much. In just a moment, we're going to play the pre-recorded cooking demonstration.
Awesome.
Alrighty, you all. Hello, my name is Tyler Stout. I'm here from Troquet. I am the chef here. Today we're going to be doing French onion soup. One of my favorites. It's perfect for the winter time, really year round for me. But it is a favorite here at the restaurant. I'm going to show you how we make it for the restaurant and go over every step. But I'll be sure to email the recipe over for anyone to make for 3, 4, 5 people. So what we like to do, I like to have about 75%, 80% Spanish onion, and the remainder, about 20, 25 of red onion. I love herbs, especially in the wintertime, hard herbs. We use in almost everything, at least some kind of herb. What I have here is rosemary, thyme, tarragon, and bay leaf, all fresh. We do use a good bit of alcohol for this dish. We have red wine and we have sherry. I use a touch of Madeira as well. I'll be sure to give you all the exact increments per item. Here I have garlic and shallot, equal parts. For this recipe, I'm using 2 whole tablespoons. That's heavy. That is, once again, the amount that we use for production for the restaurant. For you, we'll probably be using teaspoon, tablespoon tops, depending on how much garlic you like. And that's that. I don't add any other animal fat to the dish. I just use olive oil. The strength really comes from the demi that we use. The demi is a reduced veal stock. Once again, this is for the restaurant, so it's reduced all the way down for sauces. We will thin this out with either veggie stock or water, whatever you have. So let's go ahead and get started. Just lightly coat the pan that you're using. I prefer to use a rondeau or a bigger soup pot. I think a rondeau is a better bet, especially if you have a bigger one. You can caramelize the onions a little better, and they're going to cook faster, just with sheer surface area. Okay. Doesn't matter what onion goes in first. Go ahead and put it all in at the same time. Remember, we want the flame to be fairly low, about medium-low heat. We don't want to burn any of the onions. It's very important that nothing gets burnt because it will drastically affect the flavor of the soup. So I'm adding the red and the Spanish onion now. And while the onions cook, it's important to add salt now. Salt will help break down the onions while it's cooking. Also, obviously for seasoning. I add pepper towards the end, at the very end when I am tasting, to adjust seasoning. Not much sense putting it in now, because these onions will take every bit of 30-45 minutes to cook down. It's really a slow process. There's nothing fast about French onion soup. So the other ingredients that we will need that we haven't talked about is crostini. So you can take any bread, even preferably stale bread, baguette is best. Slice it thin, simply just toast it, and that's all you do for a crostini. Here we put a little olive oil, Maldon salt, and pepper on the slices of bread. And that gets us this. Very simple. Doesn't need to be perfect. I do recommend cutting the slice of baguette about 1 centimeter, if not a touch thicker, because when you do put it in the soup to finish, it will want to absorb a lot of the soup. So the thicker it is, the less time it'll take to absorb. Therefore, you won't have a big sloppy. You want some crunch with the crostini. You don't want it to just turn into soft bread. You do want to enjoy some crunch. Otherwise, the whole soup is just soft. And to continue to that, you'll also need a good bit of Gruyere. I would say about ½ cup per person to coat the soup. So when you put the soup into the cup container, you're going to put your crostini, and then you top it off with the shaved Gruyere, and then you put it in a broiler, or here we call it the salamander, until it turns golden brown. So like I said, this is going to take a little while. Once these start to soften up a bit, I'm going to add the garlic and shallots and my herbs. This I'm going to wrap in cheesecloth right now and then tie it up. Always make sure your hands are clean. No real rhyme or reason with cheesecloth. I don't believe there's any wrong way to do it if you just ensure that nothing comes out. And you also don't want too many layers of cheesecloth as well, because you want the herbs to flavor the soup. So I'm tying this with butcher's twine. Once again, no real rhyme or reason. Just making sure that everything is enclosed and we're all good to go. Okay, so after about 30 minutes, 30 to 45 minutes, depending on the surface area of whatever vessel you're using to cook, the onions. These will soften up. The volume of the onions is going to go down tenfold. And then from there, we'll add our bouquet of herbs and our garlic shallots. We'll see you after about 30 minutes. Thank you. It's been about 30 to 45 minutes depending on the surface area of your pot. We're gonna now add the bouquet of herbs and the garlic and shallot. Give this a stir. We'll continue cooking this for about It'll probably continue going for another 45 minutes until we're ready to add the demi. Now we're gonna go ahead and add the liquor and the wine. So that's red wine, Madeira, sherry. Once the wine, the alcohol cooks off, from there we will add our demi, our reduced veal stock, and then we just let that simmer for another 30-ish minutes. Perfect. Okay. All right, so now that the alcohol is cooked off a bit, we are going to add our veal stock. For the restaurant, we have the demi already reduced all the way. So now we're going to dilute it a little bit with water to make it just veal stock rather than a reduced demi. So now I'm putting a reduced demi in, and I will do half part water to bring it more of a stronger veal stock, but not quite all the way reduced. Once again, with the recipe that I have, I will edit that recipe for just veal stock rather than reduced demi. Actually, I'll do both just in case some happen to have some reduced demi. Okay, so this was about 3 quarts. I'm gonna make it 4 total. About 2 quarts of water. Right. So once again, we'll hurry up and wait. We're going to stir this, get it all incorporated, and then we'll simmer for another 45 minutes. So now we've developed flavor in stages. Rather than just putting everything in the pot, you're not going to develop flavor properly if you don't do this in the proper stages. I like my soup with French onion soup with lots and lots of onions. I don't like it too soupy. So because of that, you'll see it's pretty packed. All right, after about another 40-ish minutes of simmering, we'll taste, season, and then we'll build the soup. Great. All right, so this is what it looks like now. It's pretty much there. It's all set. Now we're gonna go to finish the seasoning. So from there, we'll add a little bit of sherry vinegar, Worcestershire, and salt and pepper to taste. We want to make sure you don't over season with salt, because soup is one of those things that you're going back in, back in, back in, back in. So after a while, it can be the salt can definitely add up, especially after that 4th or 5th bite. And don't forget, the crostini should be seasoned, and any kind of cheese naturally adds salinity to any dish. So now, finishing with what I have is about 2 tablespoons of sherry vinegar, 2 tablespoons of Worcestershire. That is going in. Obviously, the recipe that I give you will be much less. But just because that's my recipe, you can alter that in any way that you like. That is no problem. Okay. So we shouldn't need to add too much salt. We added the salt at the beginning. Now we should just make small little changes, taste for seasoning, but it shouldn't require too much salt after we had seasoned from earlier. Okay. Excuse me with my mask. So no real rhyme or reason. All onions are different. It also depends on how well you caramelize them. That will affect the salt that you use. So you'll know in the recipe, it'll say salt and pepper to taste. It won't have an exact amount of salt or pepper, because if you cook the onions properly, those onions should be sweetened. If they cook a little too fast, they won't caramelize properly and they won't be too sweet. Therefore, if I give you an exact finite amount of salt, that would be too much salt to use, because it would make the dish overly salty. So now I'm chasing one more time. I think we're all good there. Okay. So now, to complete the dish, at the restaurants we have a lion's head bowl. Gilda, una cucharon para mí, porfa, una grande. So we have the lion's head, very classical French. Paul Bocuse is known for his truffle soup as well as French onion, and this is what is used. So to finish the dish, at the restaurants, fill the soup up. Obviously at home you can use however much you would like. You can use any vessel. I just recommend you use a very sturdy ceramic vessel. Anything that's not too sturdy, it could break with the intense heat of the broiler. All right. From there, we'll add a few of the crostinis. Yes. Thank you. And then we load up on the cheese. Obviously, you can use however much you prefer. At the restaurant, we put a good amount. Then now it goes into the broiler. Of course, that would happen. All right, after a few minutes in the broiler, it should look like that. We're all set at the restaurant. Take it out of their boiler. We finish it with fresh chives. Serve like that. There you are. French onion soup. Pretty easy.
Thank you so much, Chef. That looked incredible. And at this time, we're going to invite you back on the screen for the Q&A to answer some questions about French onion soup in your restaurant. That was a great recipe. I think you may be on mute. I'll ask you to unmute. We have lots of comments coming in about people wishing they had.
Do you hear me now?
Oh, yes.
Great, great, great. Sorry about that.
No problem. Thank you so much for that great demo.
Oh, absolutely.
Our first question for you is actually, could you tell us a little bit about your restaurant the last few
Sure.
months during COVID and ways in which you guys have adapted?
Yes, we've definitely made we've combined our menus. First of all, lunch, dinner, bar, for the most part, at nighttime to make it more approachable to all. Prices are down than before the pandemic. We've been doing lots of to-go Zoom wine dinners that have been helping us out big time, upwards of 40 people sometimes. It's one day at a time during this. Nobody knows the answer. Everybody's hurting. It's just about being resilient, doing the best you can, most importantly. And, the workload's just much more. You have to, because you're working with less staff, and it's up to you and your team to take it however how far you want it to be. And I think looking around, there's not many restaurants still here in the Leather District. While it's sad, it is an opportunity for us to take advantage. And only time will tell. I think once we get out of this thing, I think we will reap the benefits. But for now, it's one day at a time, and we need to do our best to work together and, of course, stay safe and, be resilient.
It's certainly a challenging time and requires so much creativity. Could you tell us a little bit more about those wine dinners that you mentioned?
Yes, absolutely. We've been creating 3-course dinners. It doesn't have to be a 3-course dinner, but for a particular wine group, we've been doing a 3-course dinner, mostly with items from the menu. Sometimes, certain dishes don't travel well, so we have to take that into account. Not only does it may not travel well, it may not reheat properly, So we've been doing these dinners where sometimes it's from scratch, sometimes they're fully completed, and we give directions either way. And those have been a huge saving grace and a big support for us. We appreciate that, but we also appreciate the takeout, couple on a Wednesday night who's just getting a burger to go, or a chicken to go, stuff like that. We appreciate all of that. We understand not everybody feels comfortable coming into a building, let alone a restaurant. And we're dealing with that. We're dealing with that, and we appreciate everyone's support.
That's great. That's great to hear. Can you tell us a little bit more about the French onion soup and why you chose that
Sure.
recipe today? Is that a signature dish at the restaurant?
Yeah. I mean, it does well. We get great feedback. I don't know about a signature. It hasn't been on for too long, but for the winter months, I think it's a necessity. I haven't met anybody who doesn't like a French onion soup, and I think the one that we make here is terrific. And it's also a recipe that I truly feel anybody can make. It's so simple, very few ingredients, and no matter what ingredient you have, it's you can't really mess it up. You really can't. Um, so yeah, I think it's great for the winter months. It's easy, it's simple, takes a little bit of time, but and it's inexpensive. Most importantly.
Right. We have a few questions from people about the onions. You use two different types of onions. So could you tell us first what's the difference between those two types, and then
Sure.
second, why you chose those in particular?
Sure. Um, I use I base this recipe was, you know, as a young cook, you learn from your mentor. So this is my chef's recipe. He would use half Spanish, half red. I prefer a little more sweet, so that's why I use about 75% to 80% Spanish onion. But the difference is just when the onions caramelize, the two different onions, the Spanish onions tend to be a lot more sweet, and the red onions provide a little contrast to the sweetness, and they caramelize differently. So it's another texture play there. Yeah, that's just kind of the way I learned, and I haven't had one better. So that's why.
Great. Do you have any tips for slicing onions? I'm sure there's a lot of onions to be sliced for that soup.
Oh, absolutely. Um, I'm a far better visual teacher and learner. Yes, the Spanish onions tend to be yellow over the white ones. I was just reading that comment. Sorry, I got a little off track there. But if you have your onion, you have the two little roots on the end. You cut the roots off, and then from there you just cut it in half, peel it, and then you can go either way for the soup. Any direction you want. I prefer to follow the ribs in the onion. That's a great way. But yes, it's a little difficult for me to tell you over Zoom. But the good thing about this soup is, it doesn't matter. You're caramelizing the onions, even if some are bigger or smaller than the other. It really doesn't matter. Just make sure you don't burn the onions, and you'll end up with a great product.
Great to hear. We have a lot of questions about the veal stock or the glaze.
Sure.
So I guess we'll start with one, which is if you wanted to use that veal demi glaze, could you buy that somewhere, or how would you make that?
Yes. Although it is kind of hard to find, most grocery stores do in fact carry demi. Sometimes it's kind of hard to believe, but sometimes it is in the dry section, not in like a cold refrigerated area. But you can also just buy veal stock or veal broth. Just make sure there's no added salt or added sodium is what it's going to say on the box. That's very important, because if you're buying veal stock or veal broth or beef, you'll need to reduce it down a little to make it more flavorful. So if that box says it has added sodium, when you reduce that, it's going to be way too salty. So you want to take those things into account. But yes, if you can find demi, that is the better approach, because you can always control the viscosity by adding water or veggie stock. And if you thinned it out too much, you can always bring it back down to reduce it. And that's the beautiful thing about demi.
Great. And a lot of people are wondering about alternatives to veal stock if you didn't want to use veal.
Sure. You can use chicken. I'm sure you could use chicken, no problem. I haven't done it, but it can't be bad. As long as you add those aromats of garlic, hard herbs, stuff like that to give it a little more flavor, it'll work. It's just with the chicken stock, you want to make sure you reduce it down a little to get a little more hardiness. Otherwise, it'll be pretty watery, fairly bland. But at the same time, one of my favorite soups is onion consomme. So it's teach to their own. I'm sure it won't be bad chicken stock.
Great. And someone's wondering for recommendations for using sherry and the wine in the soup. Do you have brands that you always turn to?
No specific. No specific here. We use kribari, which is, very cheap box stuff. We use that for, certain things in the kitchen. Nicer projects or sauces that we use with sherry. We'll use Pedro Jimenez, which isn't so cheap. But something that we're cooking out and is going to be slow cooking and simmering for a longer time, I tend to stay away from the more expensive sherries because you're going to be cooking it off, to be quite frank.
Well, one thing you mentioned in the video, you make a point to say that you prefer olive oil and like to use olive oil in the soup. And can you tell us why that is?
Yeah, flavor. Now, I don't want to make this a blanket statement because olive oil does have, a much lower smoke point. So if you're going to be searing proteins and stuff like that, I wouldn't recommend using olive oil because it will burn much quicker than your vegetable or canola blended oil. You don't want to use olive oil for searing proteins for the most part. There are some exceptions. Now, in this instance, it's simply for flavor. The flame isn't going up too high. So it's just about adding layers of flavor there. That's all. It's just, I prefer the flavor of olive oil over canola. You can always start off with butter as well. That's no problem. It might weigh down the soup a little more, but, I love butter more than anyone, so.
Great. We have a few more questions about the alcohol that was in the soup. Could you take that out or substitute it with something different?
Yeah, totally. I mean, if you have any aversion or, you just don't consume any amount of alcohol, you can leave it out, no problem. If you want to just use all red, that's fine. All red wine. I've seen Madeira being used. I love Madeira. That's a great alternative to sherry. Even brandy. That's a great alternative as well. But yes, to answer your question, there's no problem with omitting, it won't be terrible without it.
And we have some questions about the fresh herbs. So the question is, could you remind us what those were and about how much you used of everything?
Yes, tarragon. So for tarragon, thyme, rosemary, and bay leaf, it's not all the time do I use tarragon, to be quite frank. It depends. It's kind of a mood thing. But for the recipe that I sent you all, I would use about 2 sprig per. Just make sure that it's wrapped in cheesecloth so it doesn't get stuck in your soup, so you're not consuming a branch of any sort. But yes, I would say 2 sprig of each and 2 bay leaf. It is very important to use fresh herbs. The flavor is, it's unmatched. But if you are using dry, that's no problem as well. You might just want to use a little more. I would say per recipe, a tablespoon per dried herb. Just make sure that it is in a sachet of some sort, because that is a lot of herbs for the dried. But you will need that in order to impart flavor.
And now, is that bouquet of herbs a technique you use for other soups too, or in other dishes?
All across the board. Use it in almost anything that I am fortifying that is a liquid of any sort, pretty much. Soups, sauces, reducing stocks, so much. Do we use sachets? We use so much. We have old pasta baskets that we use. It saves money on cheesecloth because we go through so much. So we'll put said item in the old pasta basket and put it in the soup, and we just take out the pasta basket and everything comes out with it. So we just wash that. It's just a way to save money. Yeah, we use that in a bunch of different things: soup, stocks, everything.
Oh, great. We have a couple of questions about French onion soup itself. And the first is, do you ever run out at the restaurant? Is this a really popular dish?
Yes, I mean, we have, especially during this pandemic, we try to keep our inventory as low as we possibly can. But, you know, days are unpredictable and sometimes we do run out and it's unfortunate, but, you know, it quickly gets made right after. You know, we won't go a whole day without it. That's for sure. Maybe a half a service, but we try not to 86 or run out of any items. Of course, we want to be able to offer everything that we do offer. But, you know, there are unfortunate times and, you know, that's all.
And on the menu at your restaurant, this is a starter. So can you tell us if you were to plan a menu around the soup and the soup was a starter, what else would you serve with this?
That's a great question. It's a great question. I'm going to assume that it's this time of year. I'm going to assume that it's 3 courses. So that'll be the first course. The second course, if it was up to me, I love going from a hot winter soup into more of a gamier dish. I think, you know, something with strong flavors. You don't want to go from a French onion soup to something pretty light. Whereas like a lighter, you know, mild flake white fish, you know, unless it's in like a consomme or something, I really recommend something that's going to hold up and blow out the first course, whereas a lamb, venison, squab, even duck, but beef, you know, a steak would be great. You know, something that'll pack a punch and kind of ascending in flavor from the first course, because the first course is packed with so much flavor. And, you know, at the same time, it is kind of heavy. But yes, that's assuming that it's this time of year as well.
Great. And now what kind of wine would you serve with it?
Well, we do have Jake here. What would you serve with the French onion soup there, Jake? Exact.
Coming in. Hi, I'm Jake. I'm the general manager here at Troquet on South. Glad to be here. We have a wines by the glass list that is 40 different labels, 40. We have a wine book that is 41 pages long. Our wine cellar downstairs is very large, organized and large. So a lot of guests come in for the French Reds. So a nice Bordeaux is probably something that we would bring out for this course.
Great.
Great. That sounds great. Now, for someone who is not in a restaurant right now and wouldn't have the wine book and the assistants choosing a wine, do you have any advice for if they were to go into a shop and pick one for this soup? How would you pick a good wine?
Okay, I'm coming back. Excellent. Go to a wine shop, talk to the person that's running the wine shop. They love to talk in pair wines. My crew here loves to talk in pair wines. We talk about that quite a bit, especially as chef comes up with new dishes. The menu here changes daily. And what I mean by that is every day, at least one dish has minor or major changes. And so in order for us to understand some of these items that are coming up, when chef describes it to us and then lets us have a sample, lets us have a dish to try, the next question we ask is, what are we pairing with this? What types of things? Is it a beer? Is it vermouth? Is it Madeira? Is it sherry? But also, is it a white wine? Is it a red wine? Is it a rosé? Is it bubbly? Those are the things that we talk about. So talk to your wine seller, the person that's selling you the wine. They'd love to be able to pair whatever you have at home with what you're doing.
That's great advice. Thank you.
Thank you.
And so knowing that your dishes adapt over time and are always changing, Chef, could you tell us a little bit about this soup and how has that adapted and what have you found that you liked or didn't like as you've changed the recipe?
Well, we haven't changed the recipe with this, to be honest. We put up a soup at the beginning of winter. We did kind of a variation on potato leek potage, just a little more fancy rather than your typical soup, potato leek soup. But you know, we had a few guests that asked for the French onion soup, and usually when more than one has a request, you know, we got to listen. You know, it's no coincidence I think it's best, you know. And at that time, that potato leek soup was on for about a month plus, and we don't really have many dishes that stay on longer than a month. There's a couple. There's only one that's been here since I've started, and that's okay. You know, that's a good thing. We want to keep changing. There's 52 seasons in a year. That's the way my philosophy, and I'll continue with that. But yeah.
Great. We do have a question from someone who
Sure.
says that they can't eat cheese. So
Oh,
would you
okay.
want the cheese in that case, or is there anything else you would put on top?
That's a great question. You know, because not having cheese on a French onion soup is, you know, that's a major component missing there. But you know, I'm personally, I can't handle too much dairy as well. You know, one of our favorite cooks here can't eat dairy as well. So, you know, you just have to admit it. It's still great to, you know, it'd still be a great soup, very perfect for the time, especially with how cold it is outside. Not having cheese on a French onion soup, yeah, it's, you know, not recommended, but it won't be bad by any means, by any means. So.
Great. Now, one thing we spoke about before the webinar started was special menus and having more customers this weekend for Valentine's Day. So could you tell us about what would be on the menu? And then also, if people are cooking at home this weekend, what would you recommend they make?
Sure. We're offering a 3-course menu only on Sunday, and it's very similar to our New Year's menu. Pretty straightforward, pretty approachable. We're offering things like, for instance, on the dinner parts of the 3-course, we're offering our duck à l'orange, a steak frite. We're having a black Perigord black truffle risotto. You know, lots of great things. Our salmon kubiak, which is probably one of the, you know, most loved dishes here, I would say. Yeah, so the favorites we're offering. You know, really excited. We love holidays at the restaurant. It's a great way to have guests who are only destination diners to really take advantage of that opportunity to win them over, especially if they're first-time diners, to get them back. What we definitely have seen a trend with New Year's, Valentine's Day, Mother's Day, holidays like that. And I think we have been taking advantage of that opportunity, and we've been seeing lots of return guests from those days. So, yeah. And the second part of your question, to talk about what would I, for any kind of, not to be cliche, but any kind of aphrodisiac, oysters, lobster, that's great. I'd like to do a rib roast for any kind of holiday, maybe a pot roast as well. I love pot roast. A pork tenderloin, if you eat pig, it's very inexpensive, very tender, and there's so much you can do with it. You know, if you just get a pork tenderloin, put a little bit of Dijon mustard and brown sugar on top and roast it, yeah, it's great. You know, 20 minutes in the oven, you know, you're having a great meal for less than $20. There's so many things, but yes, I would probably go pork tenderloin, rib roast, maybe a whole baked fish with some lemon, some herbs, nice rice pilaf. Yeah.
That's great advice. Thank you.
Yeah.
We have a question from Diane who said, why were you drawn to French cuisine over other types of cooking?
Yeah. Initially, I don't know. I think originally being from the South, I know it sounds crazy, but a lot of Southern food is heavily French. Back home, I would call what I call gravy is in France a bechamel. You know, down south, a white gravy is simply milk, flour, black pepper, and salt. That's it. And in France, that's a bechamel. So, and butter. Sorry, I apologize. Um, there's lots of French, lots of French basis and technique in Southern cooking. So I think just growing up, I didn't know any different. I didn't know any better. But coming out of high school, I knew I wanted to go to culinary school. And it just so happened that one of the top culinary schools in the nation happened to be in DC. It's a private. It's called Académie de Cuisine, and it was French. And from there, I thought I was just going to get an education on culinary arts, but it turns out that I not only did I do just that, I fell in love with classic French cooking. I am a strong believer that classics, those French classics will never die. Of course, you need to update and stay with the times and trends and all that, of course. But there's a reason. There's a reason why they're still here, and you see them all across the world. They're great, and I have tons of respect for classical French cooking. That's all I do with my spare time. All I do is my baby, my wife, and looking at food. That's all I do. I think that's what it takes to continue being creative. But yes, I think it was kind of second nature growing up. I didn't really know, but being able to cook with my family so often, and when I got to culinary school, I was like, oh, I know how to do that. I used to do that when I was 6. It's kind of nostalgic. But I've tried other things. I've worked fine dining Italian, but nothing is like French. Just nothing is like it. The technique, the depth of flavor, the history. Yeah.
That's so great. It's certainly such a beloved cuisine. And for those of us who are home cooks that love this way of eating and would be curious to learn more, do you have advice, either dishes we should try to tackle next or resources we can use at home if we didn't go to culinary school but would love to be more immersed in French cooking?
Totally. It's a great question. These are getting tougher and tougher. First of all, when I look for cooks, I don't look for anybody who's been to culinary school. I prefer drive, passion, and a positive attitude over somebody who's been to culinary school any day of the week. So what I'm trying to get at is it's not necessary. YouTube is huge. Cookbooks are huge. On Food and Cooking by Harold McGee, great. The first French laundry book is surprisingly very easy. It looks very intimidating, but if you're interested in French cuisine, the French laundry book, yes, you don't need to tackle every component of said dish, but the way that it's broken down, it's a 6-year-old can do almost anything in that book, and I mean that. So if you look at that book, once you learn how to build a stock or build a sauce, in French cooking, there's so many derivatives of said item. Like, for instance, hollandaise. There's maybe 20 derivatives. Charon, béarnaise, so much. So when it comes to French cooking, once you learn the basis or the origin of certain things, it becomes easier. It's a tree, there's so many branches. It becomes a lot easier. Stocks, soups. You just got to delve in a little bit. YouTube is great. But yes, I live and die by cookbooks. That's something that, being in the position that I am, nobody's teaching me, right? So I have to teach myself, and I'm forever a student. It's very important to constantly learn, and I'm very thankful for the position that I'm in. But yeah, read those books, YouTube, online, just simple recipes. It can't hurt to just try.
That's great advice. And if we can ask one final question of you, if you had to pick one French dish that's your favorite to cook, whether or not it's on the menu at your restaurant right now, what would be your all-time favorite French dish That's probably a tough one.
I would say Blanquette de Veau. It's a very classic veal dish. It's simple: white wine, cream, onions, veal. It's so simple, but it's so good. Coq au vin, which is a red wine braised chicken. That stuff. I could eat that every day for the rest of my life. Yeah, those two, and a simple roasted chicken. Poulet roti is what I almost, I make twice a month on Sundays. A simple roasted chicken is, it's a simple pleasure that I have.
That's thank you so much. Thanks for a great demonstration and great Q&A.
Absolutely.
This time I'm inviting.
Thank you for having me. Sorry, I talked too much.
No, thank you so much. It's been great. And at this time, I'm going to invite Sarah Bear Sennett, who's the president of Oldways, to give the concluding remarks.
Tyler,
Awesome.
thank you so much. We're falling in love with French food and you and Troquet on South. What a great cooking class and Q&A. I think everybody will want to try it. It's great to learn secrets from you and to learn many secrets from you. It was really exciting and makes me really want to come to the restaurant. And I think you and Jake may have solved one of my problems. I want to have, at Oldways, we're having tastings to keep our staff together. So I think maybe some sort of wine dinner with you guys would be a great thing for the staff. And
That would be phenomenal.
And you make me want to travel to Paris and France again. Oldways.
Oh, wow.
In addition to our nutrition and cooking programs, we have a culinary travel program, Oldways Culinaries with chefs. So perhaps we'll all go off to France sometime soon.
Hopefully.
Yes.
Stay
thank
positive.
You. This was really wonderful. It was cool to hear you talk about Harold McGee too. It's so important, and you can tell from your demo how much the science of cooking makes a difference and what you've learned and trying different cookbooks. So thank you. It was really wonderful. I look forward to seeing you in person and being at the restaurant.
Oh, absolutely.
And thank you, Andrea Burns from Age Friendly Boston, Barbara Talalian from the Friends of the Armenian Heritage Park on the Greenway, and always to Hannah, who makes things happen. So thank you.
Thank
everybody.
you.
We will be posting the video on our website. You'll get the recipe. So make that French onion soup. And cheers, and thank you so much.
Thank you all so much. It was a pleasure. Thank you.